So again, this is Roger Easton's RightStar. Welcome to this. We're going to be covering today is some of the basics. I don't know how many of you out there have seen DMC Discovery, formerly referred to as ADDM before. So we'll cover a little bit about what the basics are, but then I want to highlight some of the things that have come in the past two releases, 11.2 and 11.3, as we kind of go through this. But I mean, basically, I think most of you have probably heard of this tool, and it goes out there and does an agentless discovery using a discovery appliance or multiple discovery appliances that we put in your organization. And because we have all these different patterns of different software and network devices and storage devices, the product is able to automatically recognize those things. Oh, I know that's a Windows server. I know it's running Oracle. I know it's got Tomcat or IIS as the front end. I see that it's running PeopleSoft. I mean, it can recognize those things right out of the box for you. So that's why you're able to start doing that mapping and so forth as you go through there. So ultimately, you're going to get that entire stack, right? You're going to get the software, anything that's virtualized, the network devices, the physical devices, and we have the ability within the tool to also import your locations in there so we can associate, devices by different physical locations as you go through there. And just like on the patterns they have to recognize all that hardware and storage, they've got all these over 1,000 different relationship types that they understand, and they can recognize 100 middlewares, 15 DevOps technologies like Jira and those types of development tools. It kind of recognizes that. So most customers that we work with, a lot of the stuff is kind of mapped after the first little bit of just doing the discovery and recognizing what's there. But we certainly realize that ultimately you're going to have some applications that, might be proprietary to just you, and therefore we don't necessarily have a pattern for it. But the way the tool is designed, as long as you have somebody who can point us to, a registry setting, a naming convention, or whatever, we can start to build that mapping in, and with a little bit of work, talk about, well, what's the dev server, what's the production server? Yeah, we recognize it's got a Tomcat front-end server talking to it, and ultimately we can map those custom apps as well. In all honesty, I think this might be a little bit of a best-case scenario of 100% of the custom apps in 15 minutes, but it used to be 3 to 5 days to do it, and with the current version of the tool and the technology, certainly within a few hours, you can start to really get a handle on what those custom apps are. So, how does it work? As I mentioned, we put an appliance out there. Sometimes it's a single appliance. If you've got an environment where within your primary location you can get to all of your different locations, maybe only one appliance is necessary. Some customers have different network segments that don't have sharing between them necessarily, in which case you would put in multiple clusters and then put in one consolidation appliance that would only have to have that one port through the firewall open to collect everything from the other appliances in the other secure locations, and that works pretty well. I mean, this tool is installed in some of the largest government agencies, the largest, 50 Fortune 50 companies in the United States with hundreds of thousands of servers. So it works pretty well, and the security and so forth is what you would need to do there. And, we download a little proxy code to make a proxy server for the Windows environment, just because that's kind of the way that that works there. So here's just more of a pictorial on how that might be. You've got your discovery, your consolidated appliance, going out to DMZ1, getting the information about your Windows, your Linux, your Unix, your AIX, your HP UX, whatever your data center infrastructure is like. And then you're doing in the upper right hand here, you're kind of simulating another DMZ where you're doing the same thing, but you're ultimately bringing that back into a single view that you have out there as far as you go through it. So, how does it work? I said it's an agentless discovery that we go through. You basically give it an IP range or a specific IP you want to look at, as long as you've got network connectivity to it, and we can give it the credentials that are necessary to interrogate that box. We're able to bring that information back, store it in a local data store that's part of BMC Discovery. And then once it's in there, of course, it starts to watch all the communications going on, and that's how the maps get built. And of course, all of the usernames, the passwords, all of that, they're kept in an encrypted vault within the system, so it's very secure. And for any of you who may have questions on that, we can always set up a security session on how the systems work there. So as I mentioned, once it goes out and does that discovery, you kind of bring in visual displays here of what am I seeing. Here's a WebSphere server, here's a particular Microsoft server, here's an Exchange server over here. So whatever it is, we kind of show what's talking to what. Notice there is a little legend over here of, am I looking at another host? Am I looking at a load balancer? Am I looking at a storage system? Am I going over to a subnet and doing something? So all of that, it learns automatically and then can visually display this to you. And gosh, for those of us who work a lot in change management, wouldn't being able to review something like this prior to instituting a change on a box be something that would be visually helpful to understand what are the dependencies, what are the applications running on these devices, and so forth. Again, for your custom maps, we'll show you how you do that, and basically they've got templates out there to help you go out and start discovering it, but ultimately you want to end up with the same type of picture as you did on the known apps that we have the patterns for. Once you do that and you've got the information in your data store, then this is the central management screen of the BMC Discovery, where you can go out now and query, because you've got all the data, look at stuff about software and databases, go out and look at just your network devices, your host and all the containers, maybe look at only your virtual machines, look at your various storage, and that's both direct attached storage as well as network attached storage. And of course, it's got all the big vendors, Clarion and VM, EMC, and the IBM boxes. Obviously, NetApps is out there. All of those are kind of covered in what we're doing. Now, in version 11.2, they introduced a brand new feature, and that is now you can also discover what you've got in either Amazon or Azure, and that will automatically be mapped in, and typically, as you see here in this screen, it's color-coded for you. So you're now not just limited to your data center, but if you're either exclusively cloud, or as most of us are, you're a combination of on-prem and cloud, you can still get that single pane picture of everything that's out there for you. And as Dick mentioned, about 3 weeks ago, there was a new release, and we'll probably have a separate webinar on just this new 11.3 machine, because it's introduced a lot of new components around software lifecycle development and how it fits into your infrastructure, and it's probably worthy of a good 30 or 45 minutes by itself, but at least wanted to touch on it today, where you're adding containers in the 11.3 version. You've got software containers for Docker and Kubernetes, and then you've got your Cloud Foundry discovery that occurs out there as well. So, just a quick thing here. It's basically containers of runtime code that you've got out there. It simplifies the deployment of applications, adding features, doing those types of things. And this stuff has been out there for a long time. It's not brand new to the marketplace. What's new is that we're able to discover that within our appliance here and include that in your network maps, your application maps that we have here within the system. And of course, I mentioned the software containers out there as well, and I'll show you an example of that. And then the platform as a service, we're using Cloud Foundry, is the other new thing that they've introduced in this 11.3 version. And again, I expect we will have a seminar on just go do a deep dive on what those features are. So to kind of sum it up here, you've got the ability to recognize all those apps out of the box, but you've also got the ability to build custom patterns for your applications. You've got very good SNMP rules. You've got REST APIs if you need to extend this thing out. Of course, it is already, integrated with a number of the other BMC tools. There's a seamless integration to the Remedy CMDB, known as Atrium. There's now seamless integration to the Remedy Force CMDB. We've always had an ability to do that to Remedy Force, but it's much more automated now, where we're bringing in many more relationship types into Remedy Force automatically without having to go through Pentaho. It's now a direct API that allows you to do that. And of course it is, as it always has been, also available to populate the footprint CMDB. We're still using a Pentaho package to do that mapping. Other parts of the system that a lot of people use, we mentioned storage, of course, so there are add-ons for mainframes and those systems that are out there. And we typically also provide for you end-of-life power consumptions, vulnerability data, so you can kind of know what's out there about your particular asset. So let's kind of go over and take a look at the tool here. So I'm logged in. This is the 11.3 version here. And where my login takes me when I first get there is I'm at kind of my summary baseline dashboard over here. So here's all of the things that I could drill down in about my infrastructure. So that's my host, my virtual machines, the new hardware containers that we talked about, the new software containers that we talked about. I could drill into the storage systems, my network devices, my printers that I may have done, more detail into the network. I can also quickly see, what's talking to what over here, kind of at a summary basis, and then on any one of these hosts, as you drill into it, of course, you will see that. As I scroll on down on my baseline dashboard here, I can see my software by publisher, and of course, notice that these are all hot drill downable things that you're seeing there. Host distribution over time, host count by OS class, the typical type of things that you probably want to get your hands on. With Discovery, they just went on and built in that level of reporting dashboards for you right out of the box, so you're not having to create them there. So let's just go in and start off by bringing up a host and kind of see what we bring up there. Of course, I've just said bring up all my hosts. I had 300 and some of them, I think. I could go and just say, hey, I just want to look at this one by hitting the check box or just double clicking on it. Or I could grab a bunch of them and kind of look at them as a summary thing. I'm going to actually go over here and go to one that I like to use, which I know happens to be over here on my third page here, and we'll open up this server, and we'll give you an idea of what all is it that we bring back, having done this agentless discovery run. So this is a Microsoft server, and of course, first off, it's going to give you that visual graphic of what all it's talking to. So I can see I've got this Windows host system setting here, and the first thing I see is there's a whole bunch of virtual machines hanging off of this guy, right? I've got a Hyper-V here, and the second Hyper-V, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, seventh one, and then maybe here's another one out there. So I kind of get an idea of what this box's main role in life is. I can also see that there's some agents installed on that box, so something's doing some monitoring over here. I see that it's got a couple of applications running over. It's got a cluster server connected to it. So that's the primary visualization I get. And again, you've got this little legend here that you can bring up if you kind of want to know what's going on there. But if you want to look at the details, I'm just going to hide the visualization for a minute. So this was the name. That was a Windows server. It was manufactured by Dell. It's communicating with one other host, but it's got 9 virtual machines it's talking to, 9 software instances it's talking to. There's also it's part of a cluster that we've got out there. Scroll this on down. We'll keep looking at it. Here's the information about the domain associated with this particular server. Here is the information that's showing the information about the operating system. Obviously, it's Windows 2012 R2. What architecture, what build level, how many patches are installed on this machine. Now, we're not actually doing patch management where we're detecting missing patches and pushing them, but we certainly give you the ability to see what patches are installed on there, how many different packages are installed on this particular box. As we scroll on down here, here's that OS information as far as, when it's going to go end of life, when it's going to go end of support or end of extended report. That alone can be a very valuable report to run, just so you don't find yourself getting in one of those situations where you're paying for those premium supports, because it's there as I go through there. Scrolling on down again here, I'm starting to get into the information about the hardware, network, and storage over here. So I've got, how much RAM I've got. I can go out here and look at my IPs, my MACs, anything that I'm talking to from this particular box. Scrolling on down again, I can kind of look at how the storage is. Is it internal storage? Is it file systems? Is it network attached storage? Whatever it may be. In this case, I've looked down here at my storage volumes, knowing that I had 500 gigabytes and how much of it I consume, how much of it is free. And, just a rich level of detail about that particular box. But that's just kind of the summary view of it. The other things you might want to know is, okay, about this particular machine, I might want to query it further, like, show me the actual other machines that it's communicating with, or show me what the network connections look like. What ports are open on this machine as it's running here today in our environment that we've got out there? What are the dependencies from a network standpoint? From a what's been the process count over time? A lot of drill downs to any one of the boxes that you might want to look to. You can do that just by doing it. And if you want to bring your visualization back, you can just click on that and be able to peek at that. So that's just one example of what you might see out there. So I'm going to go back up to the top level here, and most of us today, of course, are virtualized in our environment. So I do want to bring up my virtualization dashboard and bring that out. And again, these dashboards are all out of the box. I haven't customized anything here. You can kind of just run through these, right? Hardware reference data, that's power and heat consumption and so forth. Operating systems, what machines might be right for server consolidations, look at just my Oracle things, look at my software product life cycles out there, look at just my storage overview, what's NAS and what's physical. As I mentioned, maybe look at my virtualization. And so whichever dashboard you're bringing up, you'll see that, again, everything is drilled down. Here's all my Windows OS mix within my data center. Here's my Unix spread that I have in there. Scroll this on down a little bit. I can see I'm using Hyper-V, I'm using Oracle VMs, I'm using some old Solaris zones. And again, if you wanted to see the detail that makes up the graph, here are all the predefined reports that are coming in there. So if you only wanted to know what hosts were participating in the VMs, you could just click on that, and then it brings you up a list of those. So the point here is that once the easy part has been done and you've done the discovery, now you can just use this as a data interrogation platform as you kind of go through there and see the types of things that become available. So I'm going to only go into those two dashboards. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what kind of comes out of the box, but you kind of get the idea of whether I'm looking at a hardware host, whether I'm looking at particular software. It gives you that same level of drill down as you go through there. So let's take a peek at what happens now that in 11.2 when we added the cloud in there, right? As I mentioned, today, of course, it's AWS and Azure that we've got out there, and I can kind of then come in, and again, I get my dashboards here on, public cloud usage and whether they're physical or virtuals in there and so forth. But let's just click on my cloud regions that I've got in my particular environment here, and you see that I've got a number of them in here. So I'm just going to say, well, let's look at all of them and kind of see what we have, what we've got out there. So I'm going to say, let's visualize all of these cloud instances that we've got out here. And so this kind of brings it up. This looks very much to the slide that I had brought up there. And let me just enlarge that for you just a little bit. So you can see here that I've got it broken out between Azure and AWS. Here's my, my Northern Virginia area that I've got there. So if I click on this this big one up here for my EC2 in Northern Virginia, for example, and expand that out, we can kind of see, what's comprised with that. And you can see I've got my load balancers running out here. I've got my database services running out there. I've got my applications running all in that particular office there. So I'll close up that one expansion that I had done there. And I'll go over and kind of look at the whole U.S. East environment, right? So if I click on that, again, it'll start to exploit what that is, and it just takes me to a different screen here, so it always warns you. So now I'm looking at the detail about what Northern Virginia looks like. And it's just a different view of the bigger map I just had out there. And so here I can see, this is AWS. Here's my load balances, my database servers, and then what I've got out there. And of course, on any of these, if there is more to see out there, you can expand on that and see, okay, here are the apps that are running there. If I look at my database services over there, I can expand that out, and I start to see all of those. So this addition of adding the cloud out there kind of makes this thing it fits. And, I think most of you probably know, but we provide different updates on a monthly basis. So as we expand out on our cloud and so forth, we will, of course, expand the usage of that over time. So to give you an example of both using both cloud services and your own infrastructure, I'm going to do a search out here for a Jira infrastructure that I've got out there. And I've got a number of software instances that are out there. So I'm going to bring that up and look at my Jira. And for those who don't know, Jira is a software development technology used out there for creating Agile-based implementations and so forth. So I'm going to click all of those again, and I'm going to say I'd like to visualize those. Looks like there's 6 of them out there. And what you'll see here is I've got a combination. Here within my data center, I have some Jira applications running and talking to, various databases and web servers and all out there. But I also have an instance of the Jira Data Center app that's hosted in the cloud out there. So I'm able to kind of, see the best of both. Now, one of the important features in BMC Discovery is it will discover and always map out for you everything that's talking to everything else. But, I, as a specialist, I might want to have not change what was discovered, but I might want to come in here and have the ability to only focus on the part of this I'm responsible for. So I'm only responsible for Jira as it relates to the cloud. So one of the things I can do is I can come in here and say, I want to create a custom view of this map that's already up here. So I'm going to grab just the cloud versions of that, and I'm going to say I want to model that. And I'm going to create a new application model. Again, it's just changing the view. It's not changing the underlying infrastructure. I'll just use my thing. I'm going to say I want to save that. And so now I got rid of the data center view of the Jira instance here, and I've only come over here now and focused on the cloud-based issue. And you can do that for anything that we bring up in a map. You can slice and dice it so that the person that then's kind of looking at it is seeing just the information that they need to see out there. So let's touch also over here on the new containers that we talked about that are now part of this. And we'll go back to my dashboard and click on my containers. And this is where we got into the Kubernetes, the Docker containers, and even down into the WPARs if you're on the IBM side of the house. So if I look at the Kubernetes, I don't have much in here. This is brand new to the center here. But if I open up this particular instance here, again, it's going to kind of show you what's out there and kind of how it's configured, much like it did in the other one, with the detail about those containers down here underneath it. Where is it deployed? What are the hosts that are there? What pattern do we use to do it? So the same type of thing that you would get there as far as looking at those different clusters that are out there. This is where you could also, of course, go in and look at what hosts are running Docker containers that are out there. And again, looks like I've got a number of these. If I wanted to look at them individually, I could click on those, or I could say, hey, let me just kind of see a model of how this is dispersed out there within my environment. So you can see my different Dockers here that are out there. And then, of course, on any one of those, like every other screen I've shown you, any one of these that you wanted to do, there are certain actions you could do. You could export it to CVSs, or you could run the reports that really are doing it. Well, what are those communications going on between these guys as it would relate to that? And then as far as the information about the other credentials, I'm just going to pull up one of my runs here, and you'll see here is where we did a run doing the Cloud Foundry discovery here. And of course, it would go out and it would bring, what it found as far as who was running what on the Cloud Foundry, and it becomes something that again gets reflected within your environment out there also. Here it is, the range summary we ran, the information that we got, and of course here you could then, show me the ones that are running it and where the instances are. So, again, stay tuned for a really more deep dive on this. It requires more than the 5 or 10 minutes I can do in an overall webinar of BMC discovery in general there. Another feature I always like to point out as we're doing this is, you've got all of this information, and a lot of times you're going to use a tool like this to help you get in and start doing some troubleshooting. So I'm going to type in configuration out there and see what it has out there within Discovery to help me on that. And of course, this is where I could come out there and I could look at my different things that have changed. I want to look at my reports around what's changed either by hardware or what's changed by OSs or what's changed by my network. So, the use case is we come in, we're having all these problems this morning. We know we applied a few changes last night. Let's go in and query and see exactly what changed and see if we can start troubleshooting the trouble that we've got there. So just as an example, let's look at what hardware changes may have occurred on a particular host, and I just give it the host name. And I could do that, or if I wanted to do it by a date range, since I don't know all the huge host naming conventions they've got out here, I'll just do a run and pick any one of these in general. And basically, what it's going to do is it's going to show you in this case, since it's around hardware changes, it's going to bring back a list of all the attributes that we're tracking about a given device, and of those attributes, it's going to tell you what the prior value was before we made those changes last night, then what the value is after those changes were made, and being able to do it. Here are all the attributes that we're querying: number of processors, processor type, cores per, number of logical processors, whatever the attributes are you're bringing back. What was the value before? Now what's the value after? It makes a great little tool for going out there and being able to, bring that, to use the tool now as a problem-solving tool and not just a reporting or a data mart on what your infrastructure kind of looks like there. So a lot of good and interesting information that we can bring there. Again, we'll be happy to make a copy of this slide presentation available to everybody. We also are going to make available for everybody who attended this, rather than try to go down all the questions people I know are going to have with these new features around cloud especially, we're going to send each of you this top 50 questions people are asking around the new cloud deployment. Again, that's about a 7-page report produced by BMC. We're going to send that to each of you. I suspect that they will probably do something similar to this on the 11.3 features around Kubernetes and Dockers and Cloud Foundry. If they do, we'll make sure you get that. But as I mentioned, we will probably set up a follow-on presentation anyway to address just this topic as we go through there. So with that having been said there, the only thing I would do here is to talk about if you do have questions or you want more detailed information or you want some more detailed information about what Dick had just mentioned there about our barcode scanning solution that we have out there for all of the BMC products now, the Remedy Force footprints and Remedy Enterprise is a way of getting those CIs created in your database and then being able to handle the changes that occur to those, like moving them from one location to another, assigning them to individuals and all. We have all that information available. Here's the contact information, and we appreciate your time. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and we will certainly advertise out to you when we will have some follow-on webinars that we kind of do on a fairly regular basis to keep